And we're going to continue with the first chapter of The Whispering Mountain. Owen has apparently been saved by Mr. Dando and his daughter. It looks like they are going to take him in the carriage. The bullies have run off after Dando's daughter's hawk attacked them. And we'll pick up where we left off. Galahad, he could haul half the mountain and never notice. Fresh as a daisy, aren't you, my little one? Mr. Dando clucked to the horse, who was indeed of massive build, and shook up the reins. The wagon began to rumble slowly on down the cobbled hill, while Erebus and Owen scrambled up the steps, under a bilingual notice which said, Barbara Modern, Barber and Medicine. Prided Poet. Once inside, Owen looked round with indescribable pleasure at the place which had been his happy home for 2 months as they travelled leisurely across southern England. And a snug, delightful home it made. The roof and sides were cunningly woven of latticed withies, which had a canvas facing within and without. A coat of pitch had rendered this weatherproof on the outside. Inside it was whitewashed, and Erebus, who had a decided talent for painting, had decorated it with a design of roses, cabbages, and daffodils. Red drugget covered the floor, and a fire burned in an iron stove. An aromatic smell came from the many bunches of herbs which hung overhead, drying in the warmth. And on a high shelf stood pill-boxes, medicine bottles, jars of ointment, and papers of powder. 2 shelf beds were neatly made up and covered by patchwork quilts, while 2 more, strewn with cushions, were used as seats. A red baize curtain could divide the room in half, but was, at this moment, drawn back. A table fastened to the floor had a kind of wicker fence to prevent dishes sliding off it if the wagon tilted. An oil lamp swung on a chain from the ceiling, throwing warm golden light in a never-ending procession of shadows. Pots, pans, and some Bristol ware shone on a slanted shelf. Everything there sparkled with cleanliness. From a hook on the wall dangled a gaily ribboned instrument, something between a violin and a mandolin. It was called a crwth. "I'm glad you are still here, Hawk," Owen said as the falcon, excited and roused from his foray, continued to hiss and heckle, raising and lowering his wings. "Yes, indeed." Erebus slipped a hood over Hawk's head to quiet him, and placed him on a perch ingeniously contrived from an old broom. "If we hadn't, hard it would be indeed to keep the stock pit filled. Dada is writing a long poem about King Arthur now, and they're as absent-minded it makes him. He only speaks on Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays at present, so lucky you are that today is a Wednesday." She laughed, nodding toward a great heap of books and sheets of paper, scrawled across with handwriting, which covered one of the beds. Owen, screwing his head round, read a title on the sheet nearest him. "The King at Caerleon, an epic poem in 300 cantos by Tom Dando. Canto 288. I still think it must be odd to have a father who speaks only every other day," he remarked involuntarily. "Oh, well," Erebus was philosophical. "Not so bad he is, Tom. Better it is than having no father at all." Then she blushed and exclaimed anxiously, "There's sorry I am, Owen dear. Where were the wits of me? Have you any news of your father yet?" He shook his head. "No, but that means little. Grandfather thinks he may still be alive, a prisoner perhaps in the Chinese wars, or cut off somewhere that he cannot send a letter, and letters take so long to come." "Tell me about your granddad, then, is it? Found him all right, did you, after we parted that day at Gloucester?" "Yes," Owen said, remembering the sad day last summer when he had been obliged to say goodbye to the kind friends who had carried him so far. "Yes, I had a lift in a carrier's cart along to Monmouth, and from there I walked. It took a week, but I was lucky with the weather." "And your granddad, was he pleased to see you? Fond of him, are you?" Owen had to look away from Erebus. There was too much a contrast between the warmth of her voice, the kindness of her dark eyes, between the whole friendly comfort of the little home on wheels, and the other home he was soon to re-enter. He stared hard at the falcon, biting his lip. After a moment he was able to say, "It took a little time for grandfather to believe that I was his grandson." "But you had the papers, the certificate of your birth, and your father's letter." "He said anybody might have stolen them, that my having them proved nothing." "That's silly! Who'd do such a thing, pray? And so—" "Well, so in the end he took me in. He still says, though, that I must take after my mother's family, that I'm not like a Hughes. But he's a just man. He said he was prepared to give me a home and pay for my education." "So I should think indeed," cried Erebus. "His only son's son, and your poor mamma dead of typhus fever in the voyage home from China. And the captain's letter. There, never mind me, Bach. I didn't mean to grieve you by reminding you. Here, have a mug of soup, is it?" Owen smiled, remembering how Erebus always administered hot soup to anyone in trouble. "Good soup it is, too," she said. "Hawk caught a hare as we came over Midnight Hill, and I put in a drop of the mead a sailor gave Dada in Cardiff, so drink up." Owen kept his eyes on Erebus over the rim of the mug. He had never for a moment forgotten her during the time spent at his grandfather's, but the picture of her had set firm in his mind and become less alive. Now it was almost a shock to see her again, her real self, talking and laughing. He found that he had grown so that he was very slightly the taller of the two. "You haven't changed a bit, Erebus," he said. She had long, soft hair, black as coal dust, which she wore in a knot on top for Hawk's basket. Her eyes looked almost black, too, because the pupils were so big, but they were really a very dark gray, although she spent most of her days out of doors, scouring the hills and woods for medicinal plants, while her father, with Galahad in the cart, plodded along the road. Her skin never tanned, but remained pale and clear. When she smiled, a three-cornered dimple appeared under her left cheekbone. Owen and she were not on a like